Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar. We're going to be talking about every door direct mail. Hopefully, by the time we get to the end of this session, you have a pretty clear picture of whether EDDM is a good fit for you, and maybe learn some things about how to execute well and how helpful it is to you. My name's Kevin Naughton. I'm the bald guy that owns the company. Worked here since rocks were still soft. Been here 35 years, been in the print direct mail game just about my whole life. And I'm a marketer dressed up in a printer suit. We do a lot of direct mail here. I love marketing, and our philosophy here is really to try to help people do direct marketing that is really effective.
Hi everyone, my name is Stephen Naughton. I've been in the business about 7 years full-time, but I basically grew up in and around printing and marketing, and specifically printcom. I have a degree in marketing myself from Walsh College, and I thoroughly enjoy helping organizations think creatively to accomplish their goals. Many of my customers are in the franchise space and higher ed, and I see that we have several of those people in those sectors with us today, so that's pretty exciting. If you'd like to chat about anything you hear on the webinar today, please don't hesitate to let me know. We're really excited to share some best practices and thoughts with you about how EDDM may or may not be a fit for you and your business. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn things back over here.
I've got the agenda up here, but just wanted to make it plain. Hey, we're here to help today. So if you have any questions, just enter them in the chat box. We've got somebody monitoring them. We'll take a couple-minute hiatus in the middle and answer any that have popped up, and then we'll allow a few extra at the end. So here's what we're going to talk about today. First of all, what is EDDM? EDDM is an acronym for Every Door Direct Mail. The USPS loves acronyms. We're going to talk about the benefits of EDDM, some of the pros and cons actually, and when does it make sense to do it? This is just one of the tools in the marketer's tool bag. There's people that it's a good fit for, and there's people that it's not a good fit for, and we'll try to help you figure that out. We're going to talk a little bit about postage rates. How does it stack up against conventional direct mail? We're going to talk about making a business case for EDDM, and we're not going to try to convince you to do EDDM. This is really, we've got a calculator that we will share with you that we'll be happy to provide with you after the session that'll help you decide whether you've got a business case for doing EDDM or not. We're going to talk about some specification and size issues. There are some spec issues that you have to comply with from USPS's standpoint. We're going to talk about route picking, and then finally some ways you can actually do EDDM from an executional standpoint. So let's start with, what is EDDM? It's a saturation mailing program that's offered by USPS. It's been around a few years, so we affectionately call it carpet bombing here, as opposed to mailing to selected households. You're mailing to all households within a route. As a result, no addressing is needed on the pieces. You can specify residences or residences and businesses in the carrier routes you select. You can turn off and on and off PO boxes and rural routes also. There's a few selection tools you can use in the route picking mapping tool that USPS provides. One of the big benefits of EDDM is the postage is really inexpensive, and there's some reasons behind that. The big one being USPS doesn't really have to sort the mail. We send it to them bundled, and we're sending it right to the local post office that services the recipient. So they're not having to truck it, and they're not having to bundle it sort it, and because of that, they give you a really cheap rate. But kind of one of the trade-offs to the no addressing and the fact that they're not doing sorting is, you or us have to make sure that it's bundled properly and sent to the local post office that actually serves the recipients in the carrier routes you've selected. I do want to point this out because there's some confusion. These are freestanding pieces. They're not part of a marriage mail package like Red Plum or Treasure Chest or Valpak. They are freestanding pieces. I will tell you anecdotally, we do a lot of this for people, and we have talked to people who use some of those alternatives. They have really low outbound costs for thousands, and the feedback we get is this form of direct mail, at least for some clients, is far more productive. They see a lot more foot traffic. From an EDDM standpoint, the pieces have to be flats. Flat is postal nomenclature for bigger than letter size. Letters aren't necessarily letters. Letters just a size requirement, 6 1/8 up to 6 1/8 by 11 1/2. So a flat has to be bigger than a letter. Let's talk about some of the pros and cons. We're not trying to talk you into or out of EDDM. There are pros and cons to both forms of direct mail. The pros here are kind of the pros of doing EDDM, and the cons are, could also be considered, some of the reasons to do targeted direct mail. So first of all, from a pro standpoint, you don't have to have a mailing list, and you don't have to address the pieces. So you're going to save a bunch of money right there. The postage is very low cost. And because the pieces are flat, so you can send big pieces. I'm sure you're familiar with getting like direct mail pieces from political candidates and such during the election season. They're taking advantage of, the fact that you can send big size pieces. For some folks, it can be a real high ROI tactic. Some of the cons, well, it's not targeted. You're sending to everybody. Because it's not addressed, you don't know what piece gets delivered to what person, so it can't really be personalized. You may be wasting pieces on non-prospects. I guess there's a few products that have universal need, but not all necessarily, so you may be wasting some of the pieces. And I've got another acronym in there. IMBC stands for the Intelligent Mail Barcode, which gets sprayed onto targeted direct mail pieces that are getting sent to individual recipients, because EDDM doesn't have the IMBC, tracking down to the household level is not available. So who does it make sense for? Well, the first group of people is B2C marketers, but I think it's even kind of a narrowly defined segment within that group. B2C marketers who market to a tightly defined geographic area, have prospects or customers who represent more than 50% of the population in that area. I'll show you some of the math behind that in a couple minutes here. And the customers have sufficient margin or lifetime value to warrant the acquisition cost. If you've got a product or service with broad appeal, it's pretty easy to justify the numbers. If you have one with more limited appeal, then you have to do the math. We've got a calculator for that. It's also a good fit for B2C marketers who can be effective presenting non-personalized offers. I mean, there is no doubt that relevance causes lift or creates lift. We did a session on that last month. If being able to present really highly targeted offers is going to help your case, then maybe EDDM isn't a fit for you. Some other folks we see doing a lot of EDDM are churches. We're doing a lot of church mailings, people being invited to big seasonal events, Christmas programs, Easter programs, start of the school year like children's ministry programs. The political candidates use EDDM extensively during the election season. We've seen school districts in Michigan. We've got a concept where people can actually choose what district they want to go to. So on some level, schools are having to recruit some of the people in their own district, sell them on community ed programs, kindergarten route ups, so those sorts of things. Local governments, townships, cities, whatever, it can be real cost effective from a postage standpoint. I also see realtors who farm neighborhoods using EDDM if they're trying to get listings in a particular territory. I went out and dug up a few case studies. Now, I will tell you, I found some negative case studies, and I found some positive case studies, and certainly we've seen both here. I don't want to blue sky everybody, so let me just preface this. EDDM is not the silver bullet. Sound direct marketing tactics still apply to EDDM. You've got to have the right offer, got to have good messaging. You still got to have that. We're not going to spend much time on that today. If you want help with that, let us know. We've got a direct mail assessment we can provide you at the end of the session that can help you target areas for improvement in that area. So, there are some negative ones, where it just wasn't a good fit from a marketing standpoint, or one of those variables really, the offer wasn't good or the messaging wasn't good. You're going to have to test anything you do. So test, test, test. Here's 3 that worked. The first one is a franchise system, retail oriented. We didn't really want to disclose client name here. Sending out approximately 4,500 pieces per store. The response rate has been between 3.6 and 5.8%. I would tell you they sell products that are applicable to about 70% of the population. So they're a good fit for EDDM. The response rate, really the difference in response rate, they were doing some offer testing, and there was higher response to one set of offers than the other set. Their cost per piece was about 24 cents a piece, which meant it cost each store a little under $1,100. I used an average response rate, 4.7, just took a point halfway between 3.6 and 5.8. So average response on the campaigns, 211. Cost per response, we arrived at by taking the total cost of 1,080 and divided by 211. So the cost per response was $5.11 each. Average cart was $41. Average margin after promo was about $12. They've got a customer that if they can convert them into a loyalty program, customers worth about, north of $100 a year in margin. So, to spend $5 a customer that's going to spend or turn into $100 worth of margin a year is definitely a good call for them. Totally new customers, they picked up about 6.3 per store. I will say people's definition of lapsed customer varies. My take is a lapsed customer truly is somebody whose buying pattern's been interrupted. They come in at a fixed interval and they stop coming. In the case of this customer, anybody who had ever been a loyalty program customer, even if they hadn't been into the store for over 2 years, was still considered a customer. So I would suggest that anybody that hadn't been in 3 months was probably actually should be considered a win. Case study number 2. This is really a totally different case study. It was a remodeler who was trying to drum up some remodeling business. So they sent out 5,000 flyers. They had a campaign cost of $1,293. That was print and postage. And from a hard result standpoint, they got 17 calls. They got 10 estimates. And they got $120,000 worth of work out of a $1,293 mail-in. So the ROI on that was 900 and something to 1. Pretty outstanding. This I found to be really interesting too. They looked at their Google Analytics before the campaign. They've been averaging 12 to 61, page hits a day. 5 days after the mail dropped, this is the 5-day total, was 353 total page hits, or 70 per day. But they actually tracked their page hits by day, and the numbers really weren't much different on 1 or 2, which speaks to the fact how long it took the mail to hit the household. Day 3 and 4, there were 265 page views, or 132 per day. A remodeling company isn't mass retail, and I think this one bears out a couple of interesting things. The first one is it's kind of a lead gen model. They're using EDDM to get leads. They had a 50-something% conversion rate. In my business case, I've really got it based on retail. Lead gen is kind of a different scenario. The other thing I think that's really interesting in this is it becomes very obvious that one of the chief goals for direct mail, if you're in a lead gen environment, is to drive web traffic. And, of course, we could now get into the subject of attribution. It's kind of a big, topic out there right now. I think, the web gets credit for a lot of stuff where other tactics drove people to the web. We could spend some time talking about that. I recommend using landing pages or unique URLs so you actually know where your web traffic came from and don't give all the credit to the web. Here's case study number 3. This one was a little soft on numbers, but I thought it was a fun story. It was a bakery grand opening. The guy printed 5,000 pieces. He sent out 4,000 of them. He went on a retreat with his wife, a church retreat. He was gone on the morning of the grand opening. He got back at 2 o'clock and the bakery was totally cleaned out. They had no product left. His employees told him they didn't normally open till like 11 o'clock, and there were people lined up outside the door at 8 o'clock in the morning. The owner was gone. what's the old adage? When the cat's away, the mice play. Somebody made an executive decision. They had so many people coming in. Let's just give the offer to everybody. So they stopped collecting coupons. But he felt like it was a big win. He said he had also done some newspaper advertising, but was, really giving EDDM a lot of credit for the success of the grand opening. And I will say, we do a lot of grand opening EDDM for some clients. I think it's really an effective use case for it. He had 900 people opt into store e-news. I think that's a big win too. One of the big use cases for EDDM is new customer acquisition. If you can get people to sign up for your frequent customer program or agree to give you their info to get info from you, that's solid. I said earlier, if your customers or prospects comprise 50% or more of the defined geographic area, EDDM probably makes sense. So I just, threw some rough numbers in here as far as cost of list, cost of print, that sort of thing, total cost. And, Lord knows these numbers can move around depending on list cost and how concentrated the mailing area is and, what's the size of the print piece, how ornate is it, that sort of thing. But, these are some good general figures to go off of. If you send an addressed mail piece, let's just assume you're going to put a little bit of personalization in it, maybe some offer tailoring or name or some segment specific offer or something like that. Generally speaking, 2,500, about $1,776 compared with 5,000 EDDM in the far right column, cost coming in around $1,790. So you can see that's pretty close to 50%. Just for the fun of it, I ran a 5,000 addressed mail price too, and that's $3,035. So the EDDM, you go apples to apples, quantity is quite a bit less. Postage costs. Let's compare some postage costs. I've got some EDDM rates up here. First one I'm listing is an EDDM retail rate. This would be for profitable concern. I mentioned this because I know we've got some folks from a library group in today. You're going to qualify for the nonprofit. But on the profit side, to enter it in at the retail level is 17.6 cents a piece. So basically what that means, retail level, you go get some printing done or you have it done somewhere, you pick your routes, you do your bundle slips, and you go take it to your local post office and they're going to charge you 17.6 cents each. You won't need a permit. You'll be limited to 5,000 a day. That's what it'll cost. If you have somebody like us do it, there's a few guys that do it nationally like us. We're going to use expedited postage methods to get it to the local post offices. DDU is an acronym for Destination Delivery Unit. So it's like a town post office. It's going to cost 15.6 cents each. If somebody's using priority mail to expedite the mail from where we enter it to that destination post office, depends on how far away it is. It might be half a cent, it might be 3 cents. We kind of generally use 2 cents as a rule of thumb. So you take that expediting and you throw it on top of the 15.6, it's back at 17.6. The moral of that story is probably going to cost you about the same to have somebody else enter it as if you do it yourself, but you won't have to do all the work. The nonprofits get a giant break here. If somebody like us enters it at a bulk mail entry unit and has it expedited to a DDU, it's like 7.4 cents each. And this is why you see churches and local forms of government doing a ton of this. If you go to a church somewhere and they're looking to boost attendance, talk to them about EDDM. By contrast, commercial letters, postcards that meet the size requirements, they could be letter envelope packages, self-mailers, it doesn't matter. These rates apply to all of them as long as they're under 3.5 ounces. If you're sending mail all over the place, it's just under 29 cents, nonprofit 17. If you're mailing it if your recipients are within a state, it's going to be 27.1. For the nonprofits, it's 15.4. You're getting 5-digit discounts. In other words, you've got at least 150 pieces going to the same zip code. That rate drops down to 25 cents. For nonprofit, it's 13.4. If you get into doing some carry-out stuff, higher density, this isn't full saturation, but I can't remember what the exact number is. My recollection is it's north of 25% of the people in a carrier route are going to get the piece. You can get 19.9 if you're a corporation or for profit, and the nonprofits are 11.8. There's more postage rates than, there's just a lot of them. So they offer some entry discounts. The closer we get the mail trucked to the recipient, they'll knock off between 3 and 3.5 cents. But regardless, you can see the EDDM postage is like, really cheap. If you do real high saturation targeted, it can be pretty expensive too. You still got, the addressing and list cost to assess. We just wanted to give you some information that would help you make decide whether there was a business case for EDDM. So I'm going to pop up a spreadsheet in here and kind of show you how, you can, play with the variables in your own world to decide if it works or not. But here's the questions I'd be asking. What's the average customer worth? And there's different takes on that. Is it going to be somebody who's going to repeat or be an ongoing customer? Or is it somebody who's going to be a one-time customer? If it's a big enough one-time customer, it still might make sense. Like that remodeling scenario, I think is an argument for. If you're in retail, if you can get them in and get them signed up for your e-news and offers and turn them into a ongoing customer, maybe you can turn that few bucks of margin into a purchase that happens every 3 or 4 weeks, and now they're worth $150 to $200 worth of margin a year. Or like you see dentists doing a lot of direct mail right now. They'll offer a cheap teeth cleaning and x-ray because they know if they get you in there and start putting that pokey thing in your mouth and you got some kids, they can sell you some crowns and some fillings and some braces and you're worth a few $1,000s. So how much is the customer worth over the lifetime potentially is something you should look at. What's the cost of the campaign? That's a variable. How many pieces are you going to mail? What response rate are you going to anticipate? That's something you may have to figure out through some testing. Once you figure that out, you can do some math. You can multiply number of pieces mailed by response rate and get total responses. And that'll lead you to cost per acquisition, which is taking the cost of the campaign and dividing it by the total responses. This is a metric that we think marketers should really look hard at. It's way more important than the outbound cost per thousand. What did it cost to acquire the sale or the customer? Then the total sales expected, that would be the number of responses times the average customer value up here, which could be lifetime or one time, depending on what your world looks like. And then ROI is sales or margin, depending on how you look at it. Some people look at sales, some people want to look at margin, divided by the campaign cost. I mentioned this earlier, but I'll just throw this in. If lead generation is your objective, you might want to focus on the cost per lead acquired and look real hard at what your closing ratio is off your leads. I'm going to jump out here real quick and show you the spreadsheet. Hopefully everybody can see that. I'll pump it up a little bit. And I've set this up so you can do your own math on it, play with any of the variables. So we've started out here. This would be like a retail scenario, average customer value. This is, probably like a margin figure, $150, campaigns, $1,750. Um, 5,000 pieces mailed, response rate of 3%. So I'll just show you here. If I start playing with this number here and put 100, it changes everything. If I look at turn this into a lifetime customer value of a customer, yeah, you get some ridiculous. Now, the bigger the sale, the less the response rate is going to be typically. But that remodeler guy, what did he get? Like 20 responses, which is like 0.4%. And he did, I think he did 8 deals and 120 grand. So his deal size was like 15,000. And his campaign cost was, I think, $1,250, somewhere in that territory. And Yeah, I've got they didn't all convert. That's why that number was smaller. This one doesn't totally work for lead gen. If you're in lead gen, give me a holler, give Steve a holler, and we'll give you a lead gen calculator. This one is really direct sales. So I think you see how it works. We'd be happy to provide you with this after the session, and you can like play around with it. Let's talk about size and specification issues. The pieces have to be considered a flat. Now, to be a flat, it has to be bigger than a letter. A letter is anything up to 6 1/8 by 11 1/2. There are some nuances on that. Self-mailers and booklets, I think that max dimensions 10 1/2 instead of 11 1/2 on a postcard. The maximum size is 12 by 15. So like if you really want to have some fun, you could like do like a really gigungar piece and mail that out to people. Although I have seen a few of those, and typically what ends up happening is the carriers like use them to wrap all the rest of the mail up in and put rubber bands, so you know it kind of loses the impact. It must be bundled by carrier route and appropriate paperwork filled out, and there is definitely some nuance to that. You're probably, if you try to do this yourself, you're probably going to have to do some reading. Maybe go down and talk to the post office. You can send a broad array of products. You can send postcards, you can send self-mailers, catalogs, can't be thicker than 3/4 of an inch thick. One of the nice things, because this isn't going through the Postal Service's equipment, you don't have to tab. I know everybody loves tab, those lovely pieces of paper that, you know, cut give them paper cuts and, you know, break their fingernails and stuff and obscure the wonderful artwork those designers create. So you don't have to have tabs. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about route picking, and I'm going to let Steve talk about this because he's really the expert on route picking.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump right in here. The tool that we're going to show today is actually the USPS sanctioned tool that's actually on the USPS site. So we're just going to go ahead and click this link. If you want the link or want us to send this to you after the fact, please let us know. Happy to help. Okay, awesome. So from here, and I'm going to kind of take a very focused look at what we're doing, just because I don't want to, bore everybody and put everybody to sleep. The fact of the matter is most situations are different, especially depending on what type of business you're in, or if you're with a nonprofit or a church or any one of those. So we're going to take a very basic look in the terms of somebody that's trying to market to a single local market. This would be like a store owner or a church that, wants to target folks 2 and 3 miles from their location. So beforehand, I went ahead and pulled up Phoenix, Arizona's zip code, which is 85003. You'll be quizzed on that later. Please write that down. And we're just going to go ahead and punch that in. If I wanted to enter a city and state name, I could certainly do that there. But I've got a very specific zip code that I want to target. So first things first, you'll see there's actually just a map view that will show us the neighboring zip codes. You can see that this is a very narrow zip code here, this kind of gray shaded portion. We're going to zoom in, just get a little better look at that. So before I go any further, there's a few key things that you want to look for in routes. And one thing that the Postal Service does afford you is some demographic criteria. Please keep in mind, this is all average data. This is not down to the household level, obviously. This is basically taking the whole pool of people on that route, adding all of their information together, and then dividing accordingly by the number of households. So along the top here, you're going to see a route code. And when we start picking these, you'll see this information update. But just want to show you so you can follow along here. You're going to see a route code pop in here. You're going to see how many residential addresses are on that particular route. You're going to see how many business addresses are on that particular route. And a point of distinction, you can target either or both. Most folks want to target residential only. That's perfectly okay. And then you're going to see a total, which is just the total of the residential and business addresses. You're also going to see an age bracket. And I kind of want to spend a couple seconds on this one. Most folks, and I do see, we actually have about a half dozen customers in the youth-based franchise space. And I see we've got at least 4 or 5 on the call today. So I kind of want to focus on this for you folks specifically. Typically, your customer, if you're in the youth-based franchise space, doesn't look 75 and 85 years old. There's probably some exceptions to that, and I'm probably painting with too broad of a brushstroke. But
you can probably make a general assumption in saying that your average customer is probably somewhere between the ages of 25 and 45. That may creep up closer to 55. I don't know your specific situation. But this is a tool that is very useful, specifically when you have something like a child that is a driving part of the sale. You know, the age really does matter. So we can alter this range, you know, drag it up, drag it down, whatever we want it to be. And basically what we'll end up reporting in this bar here is a percentage of households that meet that criteria. And that, more on that in a second. Same thing here next door, and this is also extremely pertinent for the youth-based folks, is the size of the home. This is going to be average number of people living in that household or dwelling. So if there's apartments or things like that, that'll factor in as well. But the size of the home, obviously, if you're looking for families with children, you want that size of the home to be higher than 2, or at least not 1. You know, you certainly want to be higher than 1.0 because chances are there's not a kid living there by themselves. If you can get closer to 3 and 4, that's obviously ideal. Based on market, that may be possible, that may not be. And then income, this is just an average income number. So just kind of want to show you a little bit of the functionality. Like I said, not going to bore you to death. Happy to go into more depth here. Just going to kind of hit the high points. It does allow you to kind of hover over a specific neighborhood. So let's say we want to select this neighborhood here. It's going to go ahead and highlight for me what other homes are on that specific route. So if we zoom in a bit further, we can see that the Cypress Street, this Encanto Boulevard, Vernon Avenue, and part of Lewis Avenue are part of this Route 85003-C016. Why is that important? I'll answer that. It's important because you want to make sure if you're trying to target an entire neighborhood, and this applies to maybe retailers, or excuse me, realtors or churches, or things where a specific neighborhood is important, you want to make sure that your entire neighborhood is on that particular route and that it's not busted up into 2 or 3 different routes. And so in this case, it looks like this is a pretty densely populated area, it appears. So I'm not exactly sure what would constitute a neighborhood or not, but if you wanted to hit both sides of this Lewis Avenue on either side of 3rd Avenue, you would need to select this next route by clicking right here. And actually, I deselected the other one. So we'll see this one here. This will pop in our second route here, 85003-C007. So pausing there just to recap what we're looking at on the top here. There are 0 businesses on this route, so this is all homes. We've got 36% of our households meet our age range, which is usually pretty good. We've got 1.91 people on the route. So if we're looking for children, that wouldn't necessarily be an awesome route, but it wouldn't necessarily be a terrible one either. Because you understand these are averages. So even though we want them to have 3 and 4 people in the household, folks that have 1 or 2 are going to bring down that average. And then a nice household income level. So if your product requires a certain amount of discretionary income, you obviously want to target folks with a higher income value. So that's kind of all I'm going to hit on the map portion. I know that I breezed over that. Please feel free to ask any questions you have or hit us up after the fact. Want to make sure we answer those for everybody. The other option I want to show you is a table view, which basically just shows in a table form everything we just explained. So if you want to look at it in a table instead of a map, just kind of get the high points. Okay, I don't want to target anybody that only has a 13% range, 25 to 44. That's not interesting to me. But maybe this 47% down here is. And then next to that, you can look across, well, but their income isn't low. So you kind of get to get the whole picture of what the route looks like in table form if you want to do that. So we're going to go ahead and hop out here. Like I said, any questions, please ask those. We deal with a lot of franchisors here. And then my father mentioned several churches and other local municipalities too. This is painting with a broad brushstroke, and we don't want to exclude anybody. But in a retail environment, most customers, 80+%, and that obviously varies by chain, come within a 3-mile radius. And there are statistics to show that. And you may know that in your specific case and may disagree with that number, and that's okay. But in a very general sense, 3 miles out is about where you want to be. The next tool that we use to kind of test that theory and either prove or disprove it is using what's called a Geo Spotting Map. And this is not something that's proprietary to PrintCom, but this is a very useful tool that we think really helps folks get a feel for how far away their customers are coming from. So we're going to go ahead and show you one of those. And this is actually a live map from one of my customers. I can't divulge who it is, but this is basically a plotting map, and you'll see different shades. Those are different customer segments around their store. And it's their store is plotted right here in the middle for us, and all their customers are plotted around. We can see down here that this little bar here is 3 miles away. 3 miles away would be about right here and would circle around. In this case, they're probably pushing 85 to 90% of their customers right in that 3 mile range. If you're looking for this as a service to kind of get a good picture for where your customers are coming from, we do provide this as a service. It's not a lot of money, especially if you've got, multiple maps and multiple markets to run. The price per map does go down. But this is a very useful step. And just kind of pausing for a moment, there are free applications out there that can do a lighter version of what you see here and give you a picture if you don't want to invest into a full-blown geospotting map. There are other resources out there. So I'm going to go ahead and hop off the horn here and let my dad jump back in. But please, if you have any questions on any of this, I know I gave everybody the 10,000 foot view. If you want any more detail, please let us know. We're happy to help. Thanks again.
Executing. How do you execute? If you've got lower volume need for EDDM, the first option is just the do-it-yourself option. Go get some printing done. Go to USPS, the site we just showed you. Pick your routes, prepare the paperwork, and take it down to the post office. That's an option. Another option you might want to take advantage of, because there's just a huge convenience associated with using this. We have a trusted partner, Click-to-Mail, and they operate an EDDM, online EDDM function called click2eddm.com. You're going to be able to upload your art, and you're going to be able to pick your routes. They actually have utilized the Postal Service's application programming interface, and you'll be able to pick your routes and upload your art and take care of it in one simple transaction. You won't have to go to a printer, and you won't have to do any bundling. They'll do it for you. If you get into higher volumes, I'm really not trying to feather our nest here, but I would say call a professional. When you get into having to do massive bundling and route selection on a massive basis, there are people that have systems, in the long term, you won't end up spending any more using somebody, and they can probably coach you on some techniques that'll make it very efficient. A couple things I want to mention that we do for retailers with multiple locations or franchisors. We actually offer branded web-to-print portals that actually have EDDM route pickers embedded in them. So if you have dealers, agents, franchisees that want to do EDDM, we can post your branded creative, they can customize it, and they can pick their routes, and the routes they select will generate a quantity, which gets pulled into our program. They know how many they're going to get charged for. It generates all the paperwork and probably takes them about 10, 15 minutes, depending on how much they agonize over route selection. The other solution we offer, we actually have applied for a patent on some software. We do work for companies that have hundreds of locations. We actually developed software that will automatically pick the carrier routes for the stores. We've got a run going through the shop right now for a company with 350 something locations. And we picked all the routes and generated all the software, or all the paperwork in about 2 hours. That does two things. It means you can execute on a broad basis very quickly and efficiently and cost effectively. Like on that program, we're doing a 6x11, about 2 million of them for less than 24 cents, including postage. That kind of draws us to the close here. Got a few more questions here. I'm going to let Steve go ahead and handle the questions.
Awesome. I'm going to take one and I'll alternate you with the second because I think you'll answer the other one a little better than I would. So there were a few questions that came in, and I'm going to try to paint with a little bit of a broad brushstroke to answer 2 or 3 questions at once. But somebody referenced, how is that Geo Spotting Map generated? And I kind of glazed over that the first time, and I apologize if that was unclear. But basically, what we did for that specific customer and what we could do for any of you is take either POS data coming out of your in-store register, or if you've got a customer database of some kind living in an Excel spreadsheet or in a CRM system of some kind. What we do is we take those customer addresses and we actually append an XY coordinate on each individual address. Basically, what that allows us to do is pin that point specifically on the map. And then what we do is we actually do the exact same thing for your physical location if you have a brick and mortar location like this last customer did. And from there, we plot the distance between the 2 points to see how far away those folks are. Now, that actually comes in the form of an Excel spreadsheet after the fact that'll basically give you a readout by mile how far away your customers are coming from to get to your individual locations. For this specific customer, it's a specialty retailer that has 270-ish, 280-ish franchisees. They had about 120 franchisees take part in this program, and we batch processed all of these reports and things all at the same time to save them some money. So if you're with a large franchise organization or with a large group of some kind that needs multiple maps output, that is an option for you to save on some of the cost to give you the picture on the local market that you're wanting. I'm going to go ahead and hop off here and let Kevin take the second question. So thank you folks for having me. This is me signing off.
Okay, somebody raised the question, does the delivery day of the week seem to make a difference with EDDM? So real truthfully, it's kind of difficult to track the delivery day of the week on EDDM because you don't have that IMBC barcode on the piece. So, you gotta kind of allow for kind of a broad window of delivery. Now, I might get a little far in the weeds here, but what we do here is we take the mail and we bundle it up and trade up, and we use a method called priority mail open and distribute that gets it from our post office here in Flint, Michigan to the destination delivery unit, wherever that's located. Generally speaking, those PMOD shipments make it to the local post office within 1 to 3 days of leaving Flint, depending on how far away it is. So like California, Florida might be on the higher end of the spectrum. Right here in Michigan and Ohio might be on the lower end of that 1 to 3 day range. Once the mail hits the local post office, generally speaking, it's delivered within a day or two. It doesn't have to go through a sorting facility. The carrier just grabs the trays and goes. Sometimes if a carrier has a particularly heavy day, he might let it sit for a day. But I would say, generally speaking, the mail is going to hit the households within 2 to about 5 days of it leaving here, depending on how far away the person is. Now, we do a lot of work in the retail space, and one of our clients' goal is always to have the pieces in mail midweek so that they pick up 3 weekends off the promotion. They want it to arrive in the week before the weekends because a lot of folks go do their shopping on Saturday and Sunday. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's kind of what I've seen. I think that wraps up all the questions. Thanks for coming. Have a good day.